All right, what's going on there, folks? Good evening. It is the Earthmaster back here on this end of the weekend. It is Sunday, November 19th, 2023. It's about 11 p.m. here, California time. Latest activity looks like a 1.0 earthquake down along the San Andreas Fault there in Southern California. That is the latest earthquake there on the globe. Looking into the Iceland area, we are seeing a slight uptick in earthquake activity here across the Grindavik region of Iceland. About 293 earthquakes here in the last 12 hours. So this is definitely a good increase in earthquake activity here compared to the past couple days where we've been witnessing, some minimal activity. It's never died down yet. We're still looking at the potential here of an eruption around the Grindavik area of Iceland. And right now, most of the activity is confined up here north of the Grindavik area around the Hagafell area where they're expecting the most likelihood of the eruption to take place here soon. And that is, according to these folks here, the Icelandic Met Office. Now, they didn't put out an update here today because of, fairly neutral conditions until just recently when we've seen an uptick in earthquake activity. So they'll probably put out one tomorrow. We'll see what they have to say, but it looks like they believe that there's still a high likelihood of a volcanic eruption, again, mainly to the north and northeast here of the Grindavik area. Well, that's good news there for the folks down there. There's still definitely some damage. Seeing quite a few photos down there of the infrastructure below the surface being damaged. A lot of cracks and uplift and sinkholes and whatnot around this area. But we can fix that, right? If this decides to erupt here across this town, we really can't fix it. So hopefully the eruption phase will continue north of this area, well north of this area, and away from the Grindavik area of Iceland. So looking at the last 12 hours of earthquake activity, 2.0 and above, we did see a handful of them, and they're mainly around the Hagafell area. This is where they believe, again, where the eruption is going to take place here, around these crater areas. The largest one in this area looks to be a 2.6, and not super shallow, but they are below the surface there at variable depths there. We'll continue to watch that, of course, and report back on any major changes. I do have a seismograph. Well, I thought I had a seismograph station up there monitoring the activity, but it looks like that is currently offline there in Iceland. Hopefully that comes back. It looks like quite a few stations offline here, so we'll definitely get back to that. All right, earthquake activity. What's going on here? One earthquake here in the last hour in Italy. Looks like a 4.8 earthquake here. Pretty deep. Goodness, this is well below the sea area. That is 410 kilometers deep. Goodness. It's been quite a while since we've seen any deep movement like that out here. Something big is brewing, I think, out here across this area when we see this type of movement. Looking at the historical data, we're going to pull this up here real quick. The darker circles indicating deeper activity below 300 kilometers. And, of course, today's earthquake right there within the last hour is within this zone. Now, there's a subduction zone area across here, across this boot. I've always seen this Italy area as a boot, right? Kind of looks like a boot and a heel. Definitely seen some deeper scale movement activity triggering out here. We'll keep an eye on this area around the Mediterranean here for potentially some larger scale activity following that deep movement quake activity within the last hour. All right, Northern California has seen a little bit of activity offshore, 4.4 into the Ferndale, California area. This was earlier this evening out around the Gorda Ridges. Now, we have been seeing a little bit of earthquake activity out here in Northern California, 3.2 early this morning, and also a 2.2. Notice the depth of these earthquakes. They're about 22 kilometers deep into, which area do you think that is? That is the Cascadia subduction zone area here. And I'm pretty certain that, let's check out the tremor and see what we have here. We got some further tremor, 119 epicenters of tremor here at the southern end of the Cascadia. So it looks like we are adding some strain up here across the subduction zone area itself. Yesterday seen a little bit more, about 130, well, around the same, 137. I think one of these days here we've seen somewhat of an elevated event. Can't remember which day it was, but either way, we're still noticing a elevated tremor event up here across Northern California and Southern Oregon that appears to be adding some further strain here at the surface levels. So we'll continue to watch that, see if we get any further activity across the Northern California area. The Bay Area southward, fairly quiet. I mean, it's been somewhat below background level activity out here in Southern California. Just very spotty movement. Most of it has been microquake activity, and I'm not for sure what's going on, but it's pretty quiet now in that area. Texas, goodness, Texas is lighting up like crazy out there in the oil fields of Texas. Quite a few earthquakes out here in the last hour or so outside of the Pecos, Texas area. One earthquake out there in the South Carolina region from early this morning. Nothing major going on out there across the East Coast for now. Elevated movement across the Middle America Trench southward into the South America region. And we can see that pretty obvious there from this morning. Quite a few 4s and 3s out there across the Middle America Trench. Quite a bit of activity stirring up here down across the Chile area as well, along the southern end of the Peru-Chile Trench, with a bunch of 4s kicking off there. Keep an eye on that area. Whenever we see elevated movement like that, it could be a sign that, things are getting ready to rock and roll down there. New Zealand. What do we got going on down here in New Zealand? A 4.9 near Bluff, well southwest of Bluff, New Zealand, well off the coast here of the South Island area, but it is just off the plate boundary, and we have been waiting for some movement out here recently. I think that's it's moderate earthquake activity, nothing big. Let me go over here to the GeoNet. Where am I at here? I got so many. One of those guys, yes, I have so many bookmarks out here, but they're all very important. They're all very important. Okay, so it looks like these guys are reporting a 5.2 compared to the USGS model. There's a 4-pointer, or 4.9 to be exact. So 5.2 from the GeoNet servers there. A light earthquake. Now, had that been around a populated area, that would not be considered light. That would be I think these guys would probably put it at a strong earthquake. But it looks as though, let's see here, who all felt it down there. I don't know. Did some folks feel it up there in Wellington? Who am I to judge if they felt it or not, right? It's a ways out of there, though, so it's a ways away from the North Island area. Kind of surprised that somebody felt it. I want to look at the earthquake drums here and see what we have. We'll probably see this down there, South Island area. I don't know. These guys calling it a 5.2? I mean, yes, we see it pretty nicely there across the South Island area, but 5.2, I think we would see that signature show up nicely across North Island as well. But look at some of these readings here in South Island. They're barely picking it up. So I don't know. I'm not really in agreement with a 5.2. I'm more leaning towards the lower side where the USGS is reporting this, probably in the upper 4, if that. Again, I read seismograph stations 24/7 a day, and 24/7 here, just looking at graphs, and a 5-pointer should definitely show up here in North Island, and it's barely showing up at some stations there in the South Island area, but it is showing up. Okay, we'll get to the cut to the chase here. So some movement going on here off of the plate boundary of the New Zealand region. It looks like that's about it, though. For the most part, let's see here. Shows about 10 kilometers deep here, just prior to the plate boundary, north of the Auckland Islands area. Looks like maybe they've seen a couple other smaller quakes in there as well. Some 3 stirring up, it looks like. Following that activity, let me go back here and see. It looks like that may be some activity there in North Island. I'm not for sure if that's a 3 or not. Sometimes New Zealand GeoNet servers, for whatever reason, they do overblow their earthquakes. I don't know. I'm not down there. I don't study their techniques in registering the size of the earthquakes, but sometimes I think it's a little overblown. But definitely seeing some earthquake activity here, South Island area. And it looks as though that definitely may be a little bit closer up here along the plate boundary itself in the South Island area. So we'll keep an eye on that. Definitely looks like things may be wanting to stir up down there across New Zealand. We've been waiting a little while here for some movement across the area. And we've seen it. It's getting closer. So keep an eye on this bend area around the North and South Island, New Zealand area. All right, one earthquake here into the Tonga region, 5.1, 244 kilometers deep there. Definitely seeing a trail of earthquake activity up here across the western edge of the Filipino plate. And I kind of said earlier, well, maybe was it last night? Said to keep an eye on this area, either the western areas here of the Filipino plate here, or upstream here. And it looks like all that deeper movement that we've seen here across the Mariana Islands here recently has put more pressure out here against the East China Sea, South China Sea area. That's where we're seeing the elevated activity here in the last 24 hours. We've seen a couple fives out there throughout the last 12 hours in that region, including a 5.8. This originally came in as a 6-pointer there north of Tokyo around the Japan Trench, about 41 kilometers there into that region. So keep an eye on that area. Definitely showing some uptick. The big island of Hawaii. Well, here's another story. Just about 11 earthquakes or so in the area around Pahala and some around the Kilauea volcano. But let's see what we have here for our data. I've been watching this tilt meter activity out here in the middle of the Pacific across this volcano area. It's been showing signs of inflation, deflation, inflation, deflation. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I've tried to cover it. It just gets repetitive here. It looks as though we are back to an inflation event here after a period, about 2 days of an deflation. You guys see that right here? So I keep saying it. We see these inflation events, couple days of deflation, followed up by inflation events for a few days, deflation, and then we're back to the inflation event. Now, we're not above what we had just seen there earlier in November, earlier this month, but we are still getting back up there. Now, I'm not 100% certain what's causing this type of inflation and deflation event here. It seems to have a cycle of elevated inflation followed by at least 2 days of deflation, and then it repeats itself. I am not 100% certain what is causing that. Obviously, it's the flow underneath the area with the hot spot there around the Hawaiian Islands. But it's definitely interesting here to watch this little bit of activity as it just cycles through. So we'll keep an eye on it. Earthquake activity out there has been... Well, let's zoom in here a little bit real quick. Stand by. Pick out one of these stations very close to the summit. Earthquake activity has been somewhat minimal. It looks like some harmonic tremor right there. Earthquake activity, though, it looks like it's picking back up here in the last 6 hours or so, maybe the last 10 hours. So keep an eye on it. It is currently not erupting, but it could kick up any time now with the continued inflation event. This is a morning update here across the Kilauea volcano. The volcano is not erupting, and it's just the same thing. They mentioned about how this is going to, potentially kick up with little or no warning. So we'll watch that and continue to report back on it. What else do we have out here? Yeah, somewhat fairly active in terms of earthquake activity here today. One earthquake in Turkey earlier this afternoon of 4.1. The Atlantic Ocean did see some activity out here earlier this morning. That's a 5.3. Now, I think here with this further movement down south here into the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, we definitely do need to keep an eye on the Iceland area. Obviously, things appear to be kicking up here. And been watching a couple different swarms here north of the Grindavik area, further to the northeast here. And that could be a sign here of some further volcanic activity across the area. Someone was asking me if this whole area could split. It would take a whole lot of divergent activity for this thing to split like that. Obviously, it is a divergent boundary. There's a lot of volcanic activity here in these rift zones. But the potential for it to just zip across and open wide up, I don't know. I don't think it's possible, but you never know. I mean, maybe it's happened before in the past somewhere, and we just don't have it in our records. But right now, there's no signs of that happening. But obviously, there is some signs of volcanic activity, magma intrusion below this area, and the Grindavik area of Iceland's included. But again, the potential and the most likely scenario is that we're going to see the eruption here where these bigger earthquakes are taking place around the Hagafell area within this zone right here. All right, space weather activity. Oh, where did my space weather? Oh, there we go. Space weather. I'm getting a little on the excited side here, folks. I'm not even joking. A little on the excited side because we are looking at a pretty massive region coming up around the northeastern limb. Look at that. After days and days and days of quietness, we get this massive explosion of sunspot activity taking place here. And I think we are going to be in for a treat coming up here as we head into the week. Look at that ginormous sunspot region up here. This is just multiple core sunspot areas. This kind of reminds me of a supercell thunderstorm with many different cells inside of it, if you're looking at the radar. But this thing, man, that is quite impressive. I don't think I've seen anything like that in this solar cycle yet. So we go from seeing nothing as far as minimal activity to something that is quite impressive. 3490, 3491. There's a couple different cores in here. There may be a couple numbers added on this list tomorrow, but that is goodness. That's a huge sunspot. I can't even stress that enough. That does harbor some potential here, I think, of some strong flaring here in the future as this gets a little bit more in view of our perspective. It is currently flaring consistently with C-flare activity right now. That's the bright regions that you see here on the UV filter ray. Actually, that's not the only one. There's further sunspots around the bend and also this area right here. So I think we're going to see some good, strong flaring coming up here into the week and the next few days here. Right now, overall threat, 99% chance for a C-flare, M-flare at 40, X-flare around 5% chance. But I think these will be elevated as we get a little bit better perspective of these huge, absolutely huge sunspots. Goodness. Like I say, I don't recall the last time I seen something that big. Goodness. The sunspot view over here, you can see that dynamic setup here. We'll definitely keep an eye on that as that faces the Earth and brings the potential for some stronger flaring in the future. No major storms. That G1 class storm that they were predicting or at least forecasting did not materialize, as you can see there on the graph. Not a whole lot. So the aurora forecast is minimal for now, but if this thing decides to kick up the party, we will all be seeing auroras all over the place if we get a strong Earth-directed flare and subsequent CME. Storm Prediction Center here. Now, we do have a severe weather threat that exists out there Monday into Tuesday. So we got Monday tomorrow, at least my time, and into Tuesday, an enhanced risk for some severe weather, and that includes a 10% hatched area of tornado probability. Now, this is rather rare for November, but we are heading into an El Nino winter pattern. Now, I wanted to bring up something here real quick. This is the forecast here. This is an anomaly forecast, of course, obviously, of the states. It's a little generic version. It's an experimental version of the El Nino forecast, and there's many different models that we can choose here, but I'm just going to choose this one for now. Through the month of October, we did see the Pacific Northwest get hit pretty good with precipitation and well above average up there. Now, as we head into the November time frame, it looks as though things may be neutral across this area of the West Coast. Nothing in terms of any increased activity. But if you look down here in the south, areas across the southeastern area shown elevated precipitation for the month of November. And that's obviously, it looks like it's playing its part right now. Now, here's where things get interesting. This is December. We're starting to notice more elevated precipitation and anomalies out here across the eastern Pacific. That would include a storm track here aiming at California. Meanwhile, while the Pacific Northwest dries up, notice that deficiency there in terms of the departure from average. There's quite a bit of departure up there in the Pacific Northwest, and that's always going to happen, well, for the most part, in an El Nino pattern. As we head into January, look at this, January 2024. Now, if you've seen the seasonal forecast there from the Storm Prediction Center, you'll see that basically January, February, and March are going to be above average precipitation out here for the West Coast. And this is just one weather model in agreement with many other weather models that show California getting quite the substantial rainfall out here. So even though right now, it is November, and we have seen rainfall in the past. And December is one of our rainy months. But even if we don't get any major storms coming up here for the rest of November and into December, it looks as though January and also into February here is going to be quite wet. So that includes areas about Northern California southward and potentially into March as well. So we got 3 months potentially coming up here of above average precipitation rates. And again, that's just one of many different models that are showing the potential above average regions. Some of them are showing further elevated activity, as far as like more so in terms of elevated rainfall is what I'm trying to say. So most of the models are trending wet out here across the California area for January, February, and March. And those are some of our good rainfall months. So even if we don't get something, actually November looks pretty darn dry here for California. The rest of November, we had a storm system blow through, brought us about half an inch, whoop-de-doo, here along the West Coast. And we should see more than that. But it looks like the rest of November is going to be very minimal. Look at that. All the way, there's December. Pretty dry out here. Most of the rainfall up north, it looks like. We'll see. And even December, look at that. Even parts of December look fairly dry in terms of rainfall accumulation out here. But look at the south. Getting in on quite a bit of moisture. And this is forecasted there across the El Nino patterns here that we're seeing this year. California, I think we're going to get it. But it's not going to be until probably after December, according to these weather models. So hang tight. It might seem like we're going into a drought, but I don't think so. We're gonna see some rainfall potentially here in January, February, and March. That's what all the models are forecasting, and it is an El Nino pattern. Sit tight. All right. What else is there, folks? Let me see here. I really wish these seismograph stations would not disappear, but occasionally they do. Hopefully they come back. If not, then I'll have to do a reset on them tomorrow. Hot Caves, Hawaii, showing a little bit of activity down there on the seismograph. Nothing, though, from the USGS within the last couple hours, but keep an eye on that. Elevated inflation, we should see a spike there in earthquake activity as well. And obviously Iceland, just a matter of time. We'll check back tomorrow, folks, on the latest information that these guys put out. I'm not up there. I wish I was. I could give you, a visual perspective of what I'm seeing, what I'm witnessing, who I'm talking to. It's it's a little quiet time right now in terms of the volcanic potential up here across the Grindavik area of Iceland. But I do believe that pause will just be temporary. It will kick up here soon. Have a good night. Monday. I'm sorry, folks. Monday is tomorrow. Take care. We'll catch you guys later. Peace out.